Was that a Magic Weekend record? Must be close. Shall we tell him about some Magic Weekend
Yes,
records?
let's do that.
So Huddersfield's victory with a winning margin of 53 points is pretty impressive. It's not the biggest winning margin at a Magic Weekend. It's not actually the second biggest winning margin, because the second biggest winning margin came against Hull KR, where they lost 54 points to nil in, I think, one of the Murrayfield games. But Warrington absolutely tonked Widnes one year by 70 or something like that, or 68 I think it was. So that was the record. But Huddersfield do have some records of their own at Magic Weekend, and this only added to that. Do you know what thundersticks are, Sarah?
They're those big blue inflatable things that you bang together and they make a noise.
I'm glad you know, because I thought it was a euphemism.
Well, so did I until you've just read that out, but I'm demonstrating here for anybody that can, see via the audio what the thundersticks actually are.
Yeah, the blue things that say try on. You've educated me, because
Well,
I
that's what
just
I'm
assumed
going
you
with.
punched him in the balls for him being relentlessly irritating.
That could also be it, but there we go. That's what I'm going with. Um, St. David says that he enjoyed sitting with Scoots, Joshua and Phil. The game, not so much. Simply, Hull were not at the races. Line defence was particularly poor. Snake at centre makes no sense. He barely touched the ball. Ho-hum.
Yeah, I can only remember him having the ball 3 times maybe in the game, and one of those was a windy run where he ran all the way across the pitch, and the second of those was the play after that where he got past the ball again. So, yeah, it's just weird to sort of have your best player so far away from the action so much of the time.
Yeah.
Mark W said, "I'll take that. Even at our lowest point this season, our young players have done us proud, and they were the stars of the show today, with Russell, Senior, Wardle Jr. and McIntosh really showing the quality coming out of our academy. That said, it was an 80-minute performance from 1 to 17. We've got some big names coming back from injury soon, but I don't see how anyone's getting dropped from that side."
Carsten says it's some sort of shame, whatever that word is.
Just say a real and we'll...
Okay, it's a real shame that the Black and Whites did not participate in the Magic Weekend, but good on Huddersfield to run an opposed training session instead. And I thought Leeds was the team who would have a shit performance.
Josh said, maybe Radders needs to be spending more time preparing with game reviews of the other team and not their Twitter. Well, at least Leeds are consistently shit. So, yeah. That's a jibe at the we got up for the Warrington game because of their Twitter disrespect or something. Is that how it went?
Yeah. Paige says, well, that was fucking shit.
Succinct. Paul Mac _78, who of course is a Huddersfield fan from afar, he says, "Huddersfield was so good across the park, it was hard to find a standout. Easily our best performance for a couple of years. Darnell continues his upward trajectory. Hopefully there's an England Knights squad this year, as that would aid his development. Yes, there is a game, at least one game against France, possibly more, I think, is what's in the planning for the Knights. So yeah, definitely agree on that. O'Brien, Gaskell, good as well. Apart from Saints and Wire, we shouldn't fear any other teams based on this performance." Yes, but based on that performance alone.
Yep.
But it was a good building block.
Paul Chamberlain said, when Hull hoped Radford would be a record-breaking coach, I assume record league and Magic losses weren't the remit. He must be done, irrespective of league position. Conversely, Woodford has been immense, led a great renaissance last year, and after early injuries has the Giants winning and playing some great stuff. Bollocks to Jack Walker as the future. McIntosh is increasingly looking the real deal.
Right, we'll get past Tim's and then we'll go back to that question about Radford. Tim G Radio says, "I was going to ask Huddersfield for our kit back, but if they do that every time they play Hull, they can keep it." Brackets, as long as they bin the cowbell. Yeah, I didn't hear the cowbell.
No, I didn't.
Weekend? No.
He was maybe not allowed out.
So, Radford and his position at Hull. I was seeing some tweets and messages before that I was reading before we started, Sarah, and I saw someone suggesting if they'll lose this week, is that maybe the time to start moving on? He hasn't had his contract sorted out beyond the end of the season, although I understand he's maybe one of those coaches because of his past success in the Challenge Cup on kind of a rolling year-to-year deal sort of situation. But what, you're the Hull fan, what do you say about that?
He's living on the back of 2016 and 2017. And whilst for the fans, getting those wins at Wembley was something very, very special, we want more. And the Hull fans are very split. There's great polarisation between those people who keep harking on about the fact, well, 2016, 2017, and those people that say, yeah, but that's the past. And, we want grand finals. We want more than just that. And yes, we are fourth in the table somehow. But, this sort of defeat, it's just unacceptable, and it's happening too often. In the 12 months since last Magic, we've conceded 30 points or more 12 times. How many other clubs have done that?
Probably not many clubs that are in a playoff race and well in a playoff race.
I imagine Widnes probably did since Magic last year.
You'd guess so, yeah.
But it's not acceptable. And there just seems to be this mentality of we'll pick and choose which matches we're going to play, which matches we're going to pick people for, and which matches, we're going to write off. I did think that we'd written the Warrington match off when I saw the team. So last week's result was a very pleasant surprise. But we knew they sent Danny Houghton for a scan on Friday, knowing that there was a possibility that his injury would rule him out of Saturday. So why then was Lytton playing on Thursday in the reserves? If there's a chance,
I guess to show off how good he can be and maybe get a deal elsewhere, because to Hull not rate him, it's bizarre, isn't it?
You've got a brilliant, reserve hooker who's coming along, and if we're not careful, he's going to go elsewhere, and then what will we be left with?
Well, that's one of the question marks, isn't it, around Hull FC? So it's one of the question marks around my club as well, as we're starting to sort of see an ageing side. But you're seeing that definitely, an ageing forward pack.
Yeah.
You go through the starting lineup here, and Washbrook, Payer, Hadley, Minicello, Westerman, they're all
Manu, Minicello,
pretty senior. And then you get to the bench and you've got Manu as well. Yeah, they're all pretty senior, those blokes, aren't they?
Hadley's still young, but we've not offered him a contract that he wants, so he's talking about going elsewhere.
Wow.
Manu and Minicello have to be finished. I think Westerman has signed a contract somewhere in the last week because his attitude has changed massively.
It wasn't his best game at all on Saturday. I'll give him that. But one of the names you just mentioned before was far worse for me. Mark Minicello.
That is classic Mark Minicello. How many times can I run across the pitch rather than running forwards?
Well, how many times was he beaten in the tackle, or didn't even make an attempt to tackle? Adam O'Brien's second try, great enterprising stuff from him. He spotted a gap and stuff. But Minicello, a defender, didn't even make a movement towards him. He just let him score. It was... Frankly, it was atrocious, and I will talk a bit about how good Huddersfield were, because I want you to talk about how bad you were. But that was the one thing that stood out to me from how bad you were. So I think must have loads more to say.
I would get rid of Green. He's out of contract at the end of the year. Get rid of Fash. Get rid of Manu, Minicello, Hadley. Westerman's going. But we need to start and get rid of Washbrook. We need to start bringing some of the young kids through, because they're going to go elsewhere if we don't. We signed Bernick with all these great reports, and he's playing at Batley.
Yeah, he had a brief sniff, didn't he, last year in the eights, and not seen him since. Levi Nzongu, what happened to him when you signed him?
Yeah, exactly. He's looked good in the reserves, but again, not got a look in. Jack Brown,
who scored on with his first touch in Super League.
Yep. Just we're not tying down Danny Langtree. We signed him, and I suspect he turned around to Radford and said, "If you're not going to play me, what's the point of me being here?" And then was told he could go.
It is very.
Radford likes
confusing.
The people he likes, and if your face doesn't fit, then you've shown the door.
And that's sometimes something that can happen when coaches stay at the same place and have had some success at that place for a while.
Yeah.
That can sometimes. It definitely felt like that has happened with Wigan as well to an extent. So I think we're in a similar place as with the clubs we support on that. Right, back to this game in particular.
Mm-hmm.
From a whole perspective, and David touched on the Jake Connor situation there as well. From a whole perspective, you had Shaw, Connor, Kelly, and Sneyd on the pitch. No Houghton, but you had the other four main creators in your side. So how was it that it looked like they never played together before?
Well, we just went for vast chunks of time where we didn't even touch the ball, did we?
Well, the start of the second half, yeah.
I mean, the start of the first half, we kicked off. We had some decent field position. It looked like we just needed that final spark to happen, and we could score some points. And then they scored their first try, and I said, "That's it, we've lost," because it was almost like you just knew we'd had that position and we hadn't scored anything, and we weren't going to score. And then just most of them just didn't look interested. They didn't look like they'd ever seen each other before. You know, I think Joshua's tackling wouldn't have been noticeably worse than most of them.
No, but the baffling thing, and we'll talk about it when we preview your next week's game, is you beat Warrington last week, you battered Cass the week before. What's going on?
Because we're picking and choosing which matches. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah.
And Radford's post-match comment was something about, oh, well, we're consistently inconsistent and that's how we are. And, well, it's not acceptable.
No, not when you've got such a fantastic travelling support who goes to all the games that you've got.
We've had him blaming the fans because we're not noisy. Too quiet at home, yep. So that's a failing of the fans. We've blamed injuries, which fair enough, we have had, some bad injuries. But to be honest, we're fairly clear of them now. It's like going back to the end of the 1990s when Peter Walsh used to tell us about how well we'd trained all week and then we'd go to Central Park and lose by 50 points.
It's all right. We're going to training well every week and losing at the DW, so...
Man up, Radford, take the blame yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that he trains them to go out there and lose, but you just don't play Washbrook at hooker.
There's some strange decisions going on, isn't there?
Dummy half was absolutely awful. It was either flying over the player's head or down by their knees or behind them. Is that not simple stuff that you learn at junior level?
Yeah, I think that you were woeful, weren't you? It's fair to say. But Huddersfield were also very good. I mean, in terms of if I'm looking at star players in this game, for example, it's hard to call because Huddersfield just ran red hot. But I liked when Mark called out the young players, and I think I'll do the same thing, really. Russell and McIntosh, they're a sign that this Huddersfield side can be going places over the next few years if they can put some good and consistent front rowers in front of those young players. And Gaskell, who was good from the platform that the forwards set for him in the game as well on Saturday. But if they can put some good and consistent front rowers in front of Russell and McIntosh, then this side can really go somewhere. And this weekend, they did have some good front rowers who were running incredibly hard. Sui Matungi and Akuma Tai, they were running with great purpose every time. They were absolutely sprinting in with no regard for what might happen to them if the contact doesn't go right when they were carrying the ball. And it really did just set an intensity and a dominance over Hull that Huddersfield were able to drive off the back of, and it probably led to some of the missed tackles and lazy defending because they were really tiring Hull out with the way they were running. I think. I don't know if you... I mean, it's hard when you're the fan on the receiving end, isn't it, to spot what's going on for the other team when you've got so much to look at what's going wrong for your team. Was there anyone that impressed you particularly for Huddersfield that you maybe weren't expecting?
Not really. I mean, I think it was, as you say, it was just one player after another breaking through the line.
Yeah. It really was. And I mean, and I suppose for highlight moments, I'm not going to ask you for one because it's hard for you, I'm sure. But almost all the Giants' second half tries in particular will be contenders. And